Welcome back to A Conversation with Carl. Today we're taking a deep dive into my favorite topic, food. But before we get started, I want to remind you if you like, please subscribe. Today we're talking about food intelligence, a new book by Julia Belluz and Kevin Hall. It deconstructs the science of food to help you understand what is on your plate. Julia is a contributing opinion writer for the New York Times. Joining me today is Julia Belluz. Welcome, Julia, to the conversation.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm very excited to have you here today. And as I said, I love food. So let's begin talking about my favorite topics.
We have this in common. Yes.
Why this book? Why now?
It's a good question. So this book, now we started to think about it almost a decade ago. And there were many points where I thought some of the issues that we were covering would sort of, people might be sick of them, like protein or even ultra processed foods. And it seems like there's more traction than ever around people understanding these connections between what they eat and their health and wanting answers. So the idea behind the book was that there's a lot of discussion, especially if you tune into social media or quite frankly, podcasts, about how to hack your health or how to, eat particular supplements or nutrients or whatever the thing is to optimize your health, but not a lot of appreciation for what these different nutrients are doing in the body and some of these foundational ideas related to diet and weight loss, like what actually is metabolism. Well, everyone is trying to speed up their metabolism. Many people have no idea what it is. What is the role of protein in the diet? And so we wanted to cover some of those issues in this book, and that's why we also called it Food Intelligence. We hope to insert a little bit of intelligence into this conversation, which is sometimes completely, I think, devoid of. It can be quite, I guess, pseudoscientific. So yeah, that was the goal of the book.
I wanted to ask you how you and Kevin got together, but I also want to go back to metabolism. So let's first answer, how did you and Kevin get connected? I know you write about that you covered him back in 2016 or 2018, and that's how you guys met.
Kevin, I was reporting on health in America, and I was based in Washington, D.C., and Kevin had by the time he left the National Institutes of Health, he had been running a lab there just outside of Washington, D.C. in Maryland. And I started to report on obesity and diabetes, and those were areas that he was researching. And I would call him and ask him different questions about the issues I was covering. And what I liked about Kevin is that he was just extremely true to the science. So instead of kind of pushing a pet theory or explanation or, only, for example, even just only talking about his own work, he would refer to the work of others. He would talk about where the uncertainties were, where science had accumulated, what we don't know about something. He just had this extremely nuanced way of looking at this area. And I think what's really fascinating about Kevin is that he came at nutrition scientist as a physicist. And so we kind of had this outsider's view into the field. And so he was a source, and this started a conversation over many years. And we would talk, and I would go to interview him in his lab. And at some point, I started to think about a book, and I basically immediately reached out to him and I said, can we do this book together? Because I thought the book would be much better if we did it together. And I think that that's certainly the case, and that the book was much stronger because both of us were involved in it. And I also thought he was just doing the most interesting work.
So you deconstruct metabolism. I've always thought that you want a faster metabolism, but that's not true. As you lose weight, your metabolism slows down.
Yes.
Yes.
So in the book, we tried to, there's one thing that we tried to make very clear in the book. Metabolism somehow became all about weight loss and all about diet and body fat, when actually it's this process that's absolutely fundamental to life, that's occurring in every cell of the body, every second you're alive. So it's what's taking the air we breathe and the food we eat and transforming it into the energy to fuel us and into the building blocks of the body. So everything from your skin, your nails, any part of you is being made by these metabolic processes. And somehow it just became this thing about body weight. And what we also unpacked in the book is the research in particular by Kevin, but also others over the last couple of decades, where you see this relationship. So everyone has this idea that, if you struggle with weight, you must have a slow metabolism. or if you lose weight, that your metabolic rate slows down, and that must be the explanation for why keeping the weight loss is hard and why you might regain weight. But Kevin did these amazing studies of the Biggest Loser TV show reality contestants. So for those listeners who aren't aware, The Biggest Losers was this absolute phenomenon on reality TV. It ran for many years, and it involved people with obesity basically going to this equivalent of a fat camp just outside Malibu, doing tremendous amounts of exercise, cutting their calories drastically, and entering this weight loss contest, basically. So whoever lost the largest percentage of weight by the end of the contest would win this $250,000 prize. Kevin tracked these people over the course of a season and then followed up with them 6 years later. And what he ends up finding is that in both cases, the people who lost the most body weight had the greatest degree of metabolic slowing. So, in other words, the metabolic rate, this slowdown that happened, seemed to be following this dramatic
It happens.
intervention.
It
Yeah,
happens when you're losing weight.
yeah, absolutely, and that it's more of a reaction than like I think a lot of people have it in their minds that a slow metabolism is going to determine weight gain, but
Yeah.
actually it seemed like the opposite was true. The people who are losing lots of weight are having the most dramatic metabolic slowdowns, and I should say before his work, there was already awareness that as weight loss is happening, the metabolic rate is slowing down, so that was already known for a long time. But what wasn't known is that there would be this relationship that people who are losing the most weight are also having this most dramatic slowdown of metabolism, and that would hold true even years later for the people who are keeping the weight off. So what we say in the book is it's not metabolism stupid. This focus on metabolism has been a big distraction from the real reasons why people are struggling with their body weight and why it is hard for people to keep weight off after they lose the weight. And that brings us to the food environment, which is what we end up, arguing in the book.
Ultra processed foods.
Yeah, ultra processed food. So, and also just this calorie glut. So, I think a lot of us take for granted that we live in this time of mind boggling variety of foods. Like, it's not normal that you go to the grocery store and 12 months of the year you have strawberries, avocados from, South America, bananas. We live with a mind boggling variety. We live with a calorie glut. Like, we have thousands of calories available, and I'm talking about the US and other high income countries. Obviously, the calorie glut isn't spread evenly around the world, but we have many, many calories available to us. And in high income countries like the US, the UK, and others, a lot of the calories that are available to us are also ultra processed. They're hyper palatable, they're energy dense, they're extremely easy to overconsume. And these foods also happen to be the most prominent in the food environments for most people. So they're what we're surrounded by now. And they tend to be the most accessible, the most available, the most affordable, and the easiest to eat relative to, for example, going out to get the ingredients to cook the entire meal yourself, which tends to be more time consuming, more expensive, just more difficult to do. So yeah, we're kind of set up in these environments for overeating. And we argue that a lot of the focus has been on individual failures of willpower.
So I would ask, when I read about people who have been on the uh,
GLP-1 based
GLP-1, yeah.
drugs. Yeah.
Yeah, when they're on it, a lot of them say they find that they are not hungry anymore because they're always thinking about food. And now the thought of food has gone out of their head.
Yes.
So how does that play into the role of food?
Yeah, so I think those drugs are working on the appetite side of the equation. So it's not about, boosting your metabolism or the energy burn in the body. It's about decreasing appetite and causing you to eat less. And so what those drugs are doing, they're a synthetic version of a hormone that's native to our bodies, and they're dosing that hormone at a much higher level than what occurs in the body. And for reasons that still aren't fully understood, the hormone acts on the brain and basically reduces appetite. It causes people to not want to eat as much. And I think anyone who has struggled with weight, myself included, you know what that, like when you're at a dinner and you want to focus on the conversation and all you can think about is the cake next to you, or it can take up a tremendous amount of mental real estate. And And these drugs, for reasons that are still mysterious, seem to act on that very thing and reduce appetite in people. So yeah, that's how they're working. The one thing I also think is that while it's wonderful that now we have more effective treatment options for people who currently have obesity, we can't turn obesity around with these drugs alone. We need to focus on the food environment and preventing obesity in the first place.
So, and I remember being in school and I had a friend who would say she can't eat too much fruit because it's too much sugar. And I just remember saying to her, well, I don't know anyone who's gone fat eating too many bananas.
You know, we have so many weird ideas about food, and often, yeah, again, this distraction theme came up again and again in the book research. It's like there was that public health push in the US against sodium, and they showed the salt shaker on the table, like reduce your sodium consumption for better health, and the target seemed to be the salt that people were putting on their food at home, when in reality what people were eating to excess was salt and ultra-processed foods. It wasn't the home-cooked food with maybe the extra dash of salt to make it taste good. It was the ultra-processed foods, and your friend's comment reminds me a little bit of that. You know, you're right, it probably wasn't the fruit that might have been causing some of her diet
Yeah.
issues or
And
stress.
well, we're loving potato chips. If you can eat, I can sit and eat a lot of
And
potato chips. I can eat a lot of bread and butter, and I could call that a meal.
yeah, and what we show in the book is this idea that the calories. So Kevin's done phenomenal work on this, and others as well. That it's the calories that really count when it comes to body fat. So there's a lot of complexity to food. Different diets and different foods are doing dramatically different things in the body. They're causing different hormonal milieus, leading to different immune responses. When you eat, for example, a low carb versus low fat diet, but if you hold the calories constant, people like Kevin have found a very almost negligible difference in the body fat loss and gain. So it's really the calories that matter, although obviously the food quality and other aspects of food matter hugely to all these other things that we think about when we eat. So of course eating is it's not just about the weight gain and loss. There's a lot of other things that are going on that are important.
Well, if you eat a slice of chocolate cake or you eat a lot of broccoli for dinner, it's a different meal. And you can have more broccoli and less chocolate cake,
Yes.
you could keep eating a lot. So
No, totally, yeah.
the diet business is a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Trillion.
Trillion dollar industry. And everyone's involved in it. Everyone's thinking about food all day because we've been all told by everybody that metabolism is the issue. And you're saying metabolism is not the issue, it's the
No,
calorie.
it's a sideshow, yeah. And not even the sorry, we're trying to what we're arguing in the book is that it's the food environment. So it's not even the individual foods themselves. It's the way. So food environment is the culture around food, the food that's accessible to you, food marketing. It's like how do we live with food in a particular place? And in the US in particular, the food industry sort of created the culture around food. It created the culture of snacking. It created the culture of convenience. The United States is also a place that's just absolutely drenched in calories. Yeah, this mind-boggling variety we spoke about earlier, as well as the ultra-processed foods. And this is the thing that changed in the time that we saw diet-related diseases take off. So I think a lot of people put these problems on themselves. They feel they've failed, they're embarrassed, they're ashamed. I spoke to one gentleman who had a brain tumor that was causing his obesity, and he said he didn't like to talk about it because he feels like it's just another excuse for why he's fat. So we've so internalized this message that the problem is us. And what we actually find in the book, where at least where the science right now stands, is it's these environmental changes. It's this availability of calories. It's the availability of ultra processed foods. It's these changes that are most linked to obesity. And there's many different types of research that pointed in that direction. So we had research on migrants, so people who come from lower income countries where traditional diets still dominate. When they move to high income countries that are like the US, like that we've just been describing, they put on weight and they develop diet related diseases in a way that their families back home don't. We had evidence from rodent studies going back to the 1970s, where when you give expose rodents to a lot of their just regular lab chow, they don't overeat, they don't gain weight. When you expose them to high fat lab chow, they don't overeat to obesity and gain weight. When you expose them to supermarket diets, which are the diets that we've been referring to, that we're exposed to, they develop, they can't stop eating, they gorge themselves, and they develop obesity in ways that researchers couldn't induce in lab rats unless they lesion their brains. We had the most compelling research came from Kevin's lab. So he ran a randomized control trial where he exposed the same group of people to minimally ultra processed diets and then moved them into into environments that were dominated by ultra processed foods. Those same people spontaneously gained weight in the ultra processed foods environment, and when they shifted back to the minimally processed diet, they spontaneously lost weight. And this isn't anything about willpower. This is about the food environments, the foods we're surrounded by. And we really hope that people get that message with the book and stop blaming themselves and start looking
So,
to their leaders and their workplaces and their schools and all these places where we're basically being inundated by the wrong foods.
so what's your advice? If I am sitting here, you and Kevin are going to tell me, like,
How should you eat?
how should I eat? Yes.
Yes. Okay. So we know there are certainly better and worse ways to eat, and the advice it's annoying, but it's really this boring old diet advice you've heard since you were a toddler. Your parents saying eat your broccoli, or we looked at the scientific advisory committee to the dietary guidelines in the U.S. over many decades, and the evidence is extremely stable. It's eat more fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, lean proteins. And then eat less of the things that we all know are bad for us, salt, sugar, and fat. So it's almost this advice that's boring at this point. It's so familiar. But the good news is it can be adapted to a variety of different eating patterns. So whether you're vegan or you want to go on an ultra low carb diet or whatever the thing is, you can adapt that generic, boring diet advice to all these different diet patterns. And I think the problem isn't that people don't know how to eat. I know that I should eat more whole grains. I know that I should eat my fruits and vegetables. You know that too. The problem is that the way we live with food now in these food environments, it makes it extremely difficult to eat that way.
Well, the hardest thing I find is that at night around 9, 10 o'clock, I'm
Yes,
sitting on the couch watching TV, and that's when I find, oh, I'm hungry, but I'm not really hungry. I
right.
just want to eat something while I watch TV.
Okay, no, and here's one little actionable thing you can do. It's something I've done. I know Kevin does it. We've made our home food environments, we've basically made it easier to eat for health in our home food environments. And what that means is just not buying the junk in the first place. Or if you do buy the junk, literally put it in a cabinet that has like a little lock and key thing. So there's a barrier to entry. And
Well, I would unlock it, keep it unlocked, and then bring the food down after like two.
I know, it's so hard, and I don't know, like it's so difficult, and there's these structural reasons that it's like it's easy to buy. We're used to eating this way, but it's good that you're aware that that's when you do it. That it's when you're tired, and when you feel a little bit low and you want to pick me up. I think just maybe being aware of that and trying a few days a week not to do it would make a difference. But anyway, it's easy to say, and it's so hard to do in practice. I know.
They can't get the food out of their head. It's in their head. They're always thinking about it. I really want this piece of food. And the minute
Yeah.
they go on these drugs, the minute they go on the Ozempic, and the minute they go on these other drugs, the first thing they all say is that I'm not thinking about food. I can go to sit at a table and you can put all the chocolate cake in front of me and I am going to not focus on it.
I can speak from my personal experience. I was a person who, for most of my earlier life, was overweight or even obese at some points. Like many women, my weight fluctuated. So what I found so fascinating in this research is that the rise of ultra processed foods, and in particular hyper palatable ultra processed foods, and all that means is that these salt, sugar, fatty, rich foods with these combinations of nutrients that don't really exist in nature. So salt and carbohydrate, fat and sugar, these types of foods. This tracks closely with like the rise of things like binge eating disorder. They're foods that are designed that we can't stop eating them. Once we start, we crave them, we want more of them, we can't stop eating them. And I really think it's like getting these foods out of your environment to the extent that you can, because once they're you're not over, as you said earlier, you're not overeating the fruit, you're not overeating the broccoli, you're not overeating the chicken. It's these foods that were designed to hook us and to get us to keep us coming back for more. So to the extent possible that you can keep them out of your house and out of your life, that's the one thing people can do. But how many of us really have the power to control that in these food environments? I think it's a very privileged select few. It's the people who can, yeah, who have the time and the wherewithal, the resources to go buy all the fresh ingredients, to cook all the meals themselves, or hire a chef to cook the meals themselves.
Well,
It's not.
that's the you walk in, strawberries usually aren't on sale, but potato chips are. Buy one, get one free. You get
Yeah.
that all the time. And when you're going in and you're rushing around and you're in a hurry, the food that is ultra processed, it's really easy and you can get it and you can bring it home and you feel like you're full, but I don't think you're ever full eating a bag of potato chips.
No, absolutely. And that's why we argue in the book that you really have to change what has to happen is pulling these policy and regulatory levers to make it so that it is easier to buy the strawberries than the chips. And that will take intervention by basically governments at every level to start to make people's food environments more conducive to health.
Also keep a bag of potato chips in your cabinet for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month, and you can't keep strawberries for a month.
Yes, yeah, these foods, but that's why they're so profitable. They were designed to be shelf stable. They can sit in a store for like 2 years, and at some point, someone will buy them. There's no issue with you have to throw them out in a few days if they don't find a consumer. So and I want to say not all, that on the flip side, not all ultra processed foods are terrible for health. So I think we've been through this, we're in this moment where they are the bogeyman. They are linked to so many poor health outcomes. But more recent data suggests that there are subcategories of ultra processed foods that are worse and some that are better for health or neutral for health. So think of things like whole grain bread, packaged hummus that might have some preservatives in them to make them last longer, or flavored yogurts or things like this. These are associated with positive, or more, sorry, I think in all three cases, positive health outcomes, and they make food preparation and consumption easier for many of us. So I don't think they're all bad. And what Kevin's research points to as well is that these foods can be formulated in ways that don't drive a lot of these behaviors that lead to overconsumption and eventually disease. And so there probably is a role for these foods. There certainly is a role for these foods, in particular in places like the US, where they dominate so much of the food supply and how people eat now. We're so used to convenience, right? Like a lot of people don't even know how to cook. They don't want to cook. And so these, I think, reformulated products also have to be part of the solution.
Did you find that when people changed their habits when they were older, they were able to change their habits? Or was it harder to change your habits when you're older? Or because we all learn them from when we're very young. And then
Right.
we
Yeah.
take these bad habits, we keep the bad habits, and now we're older. And when you're reading this, we're like, well, we have to change our habits.
Right. No, it's definitely hard. I have a mom friend here who she is now doing completely fine financially, but she grew up really poor. And she grew up on like a diet of ultra processed food, like complete diet of ultra processed foods. And she said, like, now I can buy anything I want. I know how to cook, but I still crave these foods. And she eats them, and therefore now her kids started eating them. And yeah, I think once we're in these cycles, they're extremely hard to break. But I think it is possible. Like Kevin's research shows that you shift people's food environments, and spontaneously they not only lose weight eating these whole food diets, but they also report liking them just as much as the ultra processed diets, which is a really important point. So it's possible to prepare these healthy meals in a way that people enjoy just as much as maybe the junk food they're used to eating or grew up on. So I think, yeah, this is where companies have a role to play in being more creative. Governments have a role to play in helping to make these foods more available and affordable to people who might not be able to access them now. Hopefully, yeah, I hope the future of eating is it's going to be a lot easier for people than it was when we were growing up.
You talked about myths, we talked about metabolism, we talked a little bit about protein. What are the other big myths about food
Oh
that
my
you
God, there's so many. How many hours do you have?
well, give me your like, if you were thinking about
I think
the top myths, the
yeah,
top yeah,
there's a really fundamental one that's common to what that's underlying a lot of what we've been talking about. And it's this idea that, yeah, you have complete control over every meal and snack you put in your body. You are deciding every meal and every bite of food you take. You're the powerful one in complete control. And what we uncover in the book is that there's this fascinating orchestra or sorry, there's this fascinating symphony of internal signals that are guiding your eating behavior. So while you might have control over individual meals and snacks, over periods of weeks and months, this physiology is taking over to make sure that you're maintaining this amount of body fat storage and body weight that you currently have in a given environment. And these internal signals, so think of things like hormones or neural pathways, they're interacting with signals from the food environment. And it's this still mysterious, like the food environment is reaching into our bodies to influence and guide our eating behavior in ways that are still really mysterious. And they're interacting with all these internal signals that are going on. And there's lots of evidence that below the level of conscious awareness, people are, people, for example, like Kevin did this fascinating study where people take a drug that causes them to pee out glucose or extra calories. And over a period, he tracks them over a long period of time, and they start to eat more calories to compensate for those calories that they're peeing out. And
okay.
so this physiology is taking over and it's guiding our eating behavior much more than we realize. But the important point is it's an interaction. So it's our biology interacting with these food environment. And we know that, again, from the research of Kevin and others, when you shift people's food environments to um, basically what we think of as, yeah, healthier food environments that aren't replete with these like energy dense, hyperpalatable foods, they start to spontaneously eat less and regulate their body weight at a lower level. So I think that
What
there's hope for all of us, but I think it will take again, it will take intervention to change our food environments. And I'm sitting in Paris, which is actually a place that took this very seriously, much more seriously than I realized when I moved here. So it's not an accident that Parisians are skinny and that they're gourmands. Governments at every level in the city, but also in the country, have intervened to shift people toward healthier eating patterns. And so that's everything from, organic, sustainable, basically ultra processed free school lunches to preserving the fresh open air market tradition all over France, to putting front of pack labels on foods that are basically grading them for their nutrition. So you can easily see when you walk around the supermarket whether a product that you're looking at is going to get an A on it's called Nutri-Score or an E. So they've done many things to nudge people in healthier directions. And I just hope that more countries will start to take diet related diseases more seriously and pull some of those same policy and regulatory levers.
what is the science that we definitely know? Because are we in 20 years from now, are we gonna look back at today and be like,
Oh
"Oh,
my
this
God,
was all
there's
wrong"?
so much we don't know. And I guess this is true of every subject. The deeper you go, the more you realize you know nothing. But in food, I think what's true of food is we looked at this period of nutrition science since the advent of nutrition science in the 19th century. And every single time researchers thought they had it all figured out, they realized that that wasn't the case. So they all that mattered for a healthy diet was calories and protein, and then the vitamins were discovered. Or we thought that nutrients were all that mattered, and then this idea of ultra processing came along, where actually the purpose and extent of food processing also seems to matter a lot for health. We now have technologies to look at to chemically analyze food in much more detail than we ever could before. We now have these technologies to analyze food in more chemical detail
Yeah.
than we ever have in history. And there's this emerging idea of the nutritional dark matter so that chemically food is so much more complex than we realize, that different foods interact inside of us in different ways and lead to different health outcomes. So anyway, the harder you look at food, the more complicated it becomes. And I think we'll in 20 years look back and think, wow, we certainly had a lot to learn. On the other hand, there are these fundamental truths that seem to be quite stable over time, like diets high in salt, sugar, and fat probably aren't good for us. We Diets rich in fruits, vegetables, and legumes are very good for us. There are these things that hold quite stable over many years, and that we can, I think, rely on those
Yeah.
and feel
Julia,
confident in them.
Julia Belluz, thank you so much for joining us. Here's the book. You should, if you want to go check this out, you can get it at your bookstore and you can also get it online or wherever you get your books. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you as well. And if you do enjoy this conversation, please hit the subscribe button for more of them. Thank you so much. Until next time.